Some ideas are unsettling, not because they are loud or violent, but because they quietly suggest that you, and everything you know, are far less significant than you may like to believe. Amidst a relentless wave of work, play, social interactions and relationships, ambitions, failures, culture, and all of the hallmarks of the human experience, it can pull at a particularly uncomfortable thread to stop and consider that it could all be meaningless. In the early 20th century, a novel genre of fiction began to explore this idea in a way that felt both philosophical and deeply unnerving. It imagined a universe governed not by order or morality, but by ancient, incomprehensible entities, beings whose existence stretches across time and space, and whose brief intersection with humanity brings them to the brink, and sometimes beyond, of madness. What made these stories distinctive was not simply their subject matter, but their tone. They were often presented as fragments, recovered documents, personal accounts, scattered testimonies. The horror did not lie in what was clearly seen, but in what was implied, in the suggestion that knowledge itself could be dangerous, and that some truths are better left undiscovered. Over time, this idea took on a life of its own. It moved beyond its original stories and became part of a much larger body of myth and interpretation, influencing literature, film, art, and popular culture in ways that continue to evolve today. What began as a single piece of fiction has become a cultural symbol, one that represents a particular kind of existential fear rooted in what exists beyond our ability to comprehend. I selected this article because it explores a concept that sits at the intersection of literature, philosophy, and cultural imagination. It is an example of how a single creative idea can expand far beyond its origins, shaping entire genres and continuing to resonate with audiences over time. In reading this article, we will take a closer look at the origins, development, and lasting influence of one of the most iconic figures in cosmic horror, H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu. Cthulhu is a fictional cosmic entity created by writer H.P. Lovecraft. It was introduced in his short story The Call of Cthulhu, published by the American pulp magazine Weird Tales in 1928. Considered a great old one within the pantheon of Lovecraftian cosmic entities, this creature has since been featured in numerous pop culture references. Lovecraft depicts it as a gigantic entity worshipped by cultists, in the shape of a green octopus, dragon, and a caricature of human form. It is the namesake of the Lovecraft-inspired Cthulhu Mythos. Etymology, spelling, and pronunciation. Invented by Lovecraft in 1928, the name Cthulhu was probably chosen to echo the word chthonic, ancient Greek, of the earth, as apparently suggested by Lovecraft himself at the end of his 1923 tale, The Rats in the Walls. The chthonic, or earth-dwelling, spirit has precedence in numerous ancient and medieval mythologies, often guarding mines and precious underground treasures, notably in the Germanic dwarfs and the Greek chalybes, telchines, or dactyls. Lovecraft transcribed the pronunciation of Cthulhu as Cthulhu and said, the first syllable pronounced gutturally and very thickly. The U is about like that in full, and the first syllable is not unlike Clolan sound. Hence the H represents the guttural thickness, yielding something akin to S. T. Joshi points out, however, that Lovecraft gave different pronunciations on different occasions. According to Lovecraft, this is merely the closest that the human vocal apparatus can come to reproducing the syllables of an alien language. Cthulhu has also been spelled in many other ways, including Tulu, Cthulhu, and Cthulhu. Long after Lovecraft's death, Chaosium stated in the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, "We say it Cthulhu," even while noting that Lovecraft said it differently. Others use the pronunciation. Description. In the Call of Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft describes a statue of Cthulhu as a monster of vaguely anthropoid outline, but with an octopus-like head whose face was a mass of feelers, a scaly, rubbery-looking body, prodigious claws on hind and fore feet, and long, narrow wings behind. A carving of Cthulhu is described thus. It seemed to be a sort of monster, or symbol representing a monster, of a form which only a diseased fancy could conceive. If I say that my somewhat extravagant imagination yielded simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature, I shall not be unfaithful to the spirit of the thing. A pulpy, tentacled head surmounted a grotesque and scaly body with rudimentary wings. Johansen in the Call of Cthulhu states that the thing cannot be described. There is no language for such abysms of shrieking and immemorial lunacy, such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order. A mountain walked or stumbled. Cthulhu is described again shortly thereafter as a mountainous monstrosity. His age is described to be at least vigintillions of years. He is also said to have cast spells which preserve the great old ones until their reawakening. Cthulhu is said to resemble a green octopus, dragon, and a human caricature, hundreds of meters tall, with webbed, human-looking arms and legs and a pair of rudimentary wings on its back. Its head is depicted as similar to the entirety of a gigantic octopus, with an unknown number of tentacles surrounding its supposed mouth. Publication history. The short story that first mentions Cthulhu, The Call of Cthulhu, was published in Weird Tales in 1928 and established the character as a malevolent entity, hibernating within Relia, an underwater city in the South Pacific. The imprisoned Cthulhu is apparently the source of constant subconscious anxiety for all mankind, and is also the object of worship, both by many human cults, including some within New Zealand, Greenland, Louisiana, and the Chinese mountains, and by other Lovecraftian monsters, called Deep Ones and Migo. The short story asserts the premise that, while currently trapped, Cthulhu will eventually return. His worshippers chant Piachinglui Mglw Naf Cthulhu Relia Ganagulfdane. In his house at Relia, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. Lovecraft conceived a detailed genealogy for Cthulhu, published as Letter 617 in Selected Letters, and made the character a central reference in his works. The short story The Dunwich Horror, 1928, refers to Cthulhu, while The Whisperer in Darkness, 1930, hints that one of his characters knows the creature's origins. I learned whence Cthulhu first came, and why half the great temporary stars of history had flared forth. The 1931 novella At the Mountains of Madness refers to this star spawn of Cthulhu, who warred with another race called the Elder Things before the dawn of man. August Derleth, a correspondent of Lovecraft's, used the creature's name to identify the system of lore employed by Lovecraft and his literary successors, the Cthulhu Mythos. In 1937, Derleth wrote the short story The Return of Hastur, and proposed two groups of opposed cosmic entities. The old, or ancient ones, the elder gods, of cosmic good, and those of cosmic evil, bearing many names, and themselves of different groups, as if associated with the elements, and yet transcending them. For there are the water beings, hidden in the depths, those of air that are the primal lurkers beyond time, those of earth, horrible animate survivors of distant eons. According to Derleth's scheme, Great Cthulhu is one of the water elementals, and was engaged in an age-old arch-rivalry with a designated air elemental, Hastur the Unspeakable, described as Cthulhu's half-brother. Based on this framework, Derleth wrote a series of short stories published in Weird Tales, 1944 to 1952, and collected as The Trail of Cthulhu, depicting the struggle of a Dr. Laban Shrewsbury and his associates against Cthulhu and his minions. In addition, Cthulhu is referenced in Derleth's 1945 novel The Lurker at the Threshold, published by Arkham House. The novel can also be found in The Watchers Out of Time and Others, a collection of stories from Derleth's interpretations of Lovecraftian mythos, published by Arkham House in 1974. Derleth's interpretations have been criticized by Lovecraft enthusiast Michel Houellebecq, among others. Houellebecq's H.P. Lovecraft, Against the World, Against Life, 2005, decries Derleth for attempting to reshape Lovecraft's strictly amoral continuity into a stereotypical conflict between forces of objective good and evil. In John Glasby's A Shadow from the Eons, Cthulhu is seen by the narrator roaming the riverbank near Dominic Waldron's castle and roaring. The character's influence also extended into gaming literature. Games company TSR included an entire chapter on the Cthulhu mythos, including character statistics, in the first printing of Dungeons & Dragons sourcebook Deities and Demigods, 1980. TSR, however, were unaware that Arkham House, which asserted copyright on almost all Lovecraft literature, had already licensed the Cthulhu property to game company Chaosium. Although Chaosium stipulated that TSR could continue to use the material if each future edition featured a published credit to Chaosium, TSR refused, and the material was removed from all subsequent editions. Politics. Cthulhu has appeared as a parody candidate in several elections, including the 2010 Polish presidential election and the 2012 and 2016 U.S. presidential elections. The faux campaigns usually satirize voters who claim to vote for the lesser evil. Cthulhu for America ran during the 2016 American presidential election, drawing comparisons with other satirical presidential candidates, such as Vermin Supreme. The organization had a platform that included the legalization of human sacrifice, driving all Americans insane, and an end to peace. In 2016, the troll account known as the Dark Lord Cthulhu submitted an official application to be on the Massachusetts presidential ballot. The account also raised over $4,000 from fans to fund the campaign through a GoFundMe.com page. GoFundMe removed the campaign page and refunded contributions. Science. Several organisms have been named after Cthulhu, including the California spider Pomoa Cthulhu, the New Guinea moth Spiridonia thulhui, and Solacina Cthulhu, a fossil echinoderm. Two microorganisms that assist in the digestion of wood by termites have been named after Cthulhu and Cthulhu's daughter, Phila, Cthulhu macrofasciculum and Phila microfasciculum. In 2014, science and technology scholar Donna Haraway gave a talk entitled Anthropocene, Capitolocene, Thylacine, Staying with the Trouble, in which she proposed the term Thylacine as an alternative for the concept of the Anthropocene era, due to the entangling interconnectedness of all supposedly individual beings. Haraway has denied any indebtedness to Lovecraft's Cthulhu, claiming that her Cthulhu is derived from Greek chthonios, of the earth. However, the Lovecraft character is much closer to her coined term than the Greek root, and her description of its meaning coincides with Lovecraft's idea of the apocalyptic, multi-tentacled threat of Cthulhu to collapse civilization into an endless dark horror. Thylacine does not close in on itself. It does not round off. Its contact zones are ubiquitous and continuously spin out loopy tendrils. In 2015, an elongated, dark region along the equator of Pluto, initially referred to as the Whale, was proposed to be named Cthulhu Region by the NASA team responsible for the New Horizons mission. It was given the informal name Cthulhu Macula, though the feature was later officially named Belton Regio by the International Astronomical Union. Sourced from Wikipedia. May 2025. Produced by ttsreader.com. And Wikireadia or Readipedia for your viewing and listening pleasure. Thank you for listening. As always, please like the video, subscribe to the channels, and leave your recommendations in the comments. What would you like to learn about next?